welcome to another episode of Transforming the Truth. My name is Taryn, and I'm sitting down with the awesome Robert.
Awesome. Okay, I'll take that.
I appreciate you coming all the way out here and sitting down with me to have this conversation.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, normally what I do is I go through just like demographics, and then we get into all the good stuff. If you watch the previous episodes, you do know that this is geared towards a lot of social issues: racism, discrimination, sexual identity, mental health, environmentalism, all those things. So my goal is to bring up these important issues, have conversations with them, so that hopefully it brings some attention to the issues, and maybe if somebody's listening or watching, it'll just like trigger like, okay, well maybe I can think about it this way. I know everybody says they're set in their ways or whatever, but it's always my goal to like just try. If you just try for me. And so in sitting down with all these different people, I'm hoping that maybe somebody can connect with somebody else that they wouldn't normally connect with, you know, in the world or whatever.
Okay.
So I've known Robert for a while.
Yeah.
But I actually don't know. How old are you?
I'm 39. I just turned 39 a couple months ago.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting up there, man.
I know, right?
Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Culver City, California. Okay. So like pretty much Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
And then we moved around a lot because we didn't have a lot of money growing up. So it was from there to like South Central to Inglewood to North Hollywood. And then once I hit like right past middle school, my family moved to the high desert in Hesperia. They got a house out there. So we moved out to Hesperia. So I went there for pretty much the very end of middle school and high school, and then moved back down to LA for college. So, yeah.
Gotcha. So wait, how did you end up how did we meet all the way down here?
Okay, so when basically...
we're talking about Hollywood.
Yeah, so I lived in Hollywood. So basically, I lived in Vegas for like a small period of time when I got done working at Disneyland. I worked at Disneyland for 5 years. And then right after that, I moved to Vegas, lived in Vegas for like 8-9 months. When I moved back down from Vegas, I lived in Hollywood.
There you go.
And I was in Hollywood for like a good 6 years. So that's the period of time when we were all hanging out. And we all knew each other. Yeah. So yeah, it was during that time period.
You've been all these places that are really far from where we actually met. So I was just... So what's your heritage?
Well, I would say
other than black.
No, yeah, I guess I would. Yeah, I guess I would say for the most part, I know that my aunt did a whole ancestry thing with us, and I know that a majority of our family that we are able to trace, because my on my mom's side and on my dad's side, they're both from the South, like the Louisiana, Mississippi area. Right. And then they moved out west. My mom's side of the family to the California area, my dad's side of the family to the Las Vegas, Nevada area. Gotcha. So from before then, my mom's side of the family, I know we're West African. It's Mali, basically. Okay. Like pretty much a vast majority of it. Right. And then my dad's side of the family, it's a bit more Central African, but it's West/Central. So the whole ancestry heritage comes from there. But, you know, we're just from, I guess, like the last 4-something generations, we're, you know, West Coast people.
Louisiana to the West Coast.
Yeah, that's what's up.
Yeah. So did you recognize your skin color like at a young age? So did you notice the differences between like you and other kids, or did your parents or family talk to you about it before you kind of like had the realization?
I would say when we were younger, when I was much younger, not really, because, you know, living around here, living in the places where I lived, we were the majority. Right. So I didn't really encounter racism or anything like that when I was younger, growing up. I was surrounded by people who looked like me, and then the people who didn't really look like me, it's either you would see them on TV, or I knew a lot of Latino people growing up, a lot of Latinx, a lot of Hispanic people, because, you know, living in Southern California. So that was pretty much the demographic up until I moved into the high desert area. Right. Then it was a complete flip. Then it went for a majority of literally being like 90% white people. It was very interesting.
So about how old were you when you transitioned to the high desert?
11, 12, 12-ish, yeah.
So for that age to have that drastic kind of change at that time, that's got to be,
It was hard. It was really different. I really didn't like it, and it was to the point where, you know, I didn't really see anyone who looked like me except for the people that were in my family.
Right.
And then the few other black people that I was in school with, I mean, you just kind of, you know, saw them and hung out with them in school, and that was kind of it. There weren't a whole lot of us. Right. So it was just one of those things where, you know, you kind of banded together a little bit when you could, but for the most part, it's just like you were vastly outnumbered.
Yeah. So at that point, because I would assume that, maybe not, was your skin color or being black an issue for you ever at that point? Do you have any memories that you can
For
share?
sure. I mean, just people don't think, especially children at that age, they're not really considering the things that they're saying, or even if they mean it in a good way. So, for example, I would get comments like, "Oh, you speak very well," you know, as opposed to one, you know, it would just be nice if they registered what they were going to say before they said it. But it's difficult to ask anyone to do that.
Right.
So when it comes down to it, I think the best thing you can do is just be honest with how you feel if anyone ever makes you feel uncomfortable with like things they say. Right. If you're a person that is like, you know, ethnic. So.
Yeah. I get that, but people, I just feel like people, even if they were to process it, it like goes and goes and goes, and they're still going to say the same thing unless somebody points out to them, hey, this is why. And I also don't think that it should be your job to say, hey, this is why, you know, that's probably not something you should say, or don't say it like that, or this comes off as this. And even when you do that, people are so like, well, why is he telling me, like, you know, and I'm just like...
Yeah, people tend to get offended sometimes because they feel that they're not doing anything wrong, or like we were just talking before, they are good-mannered or good-intentioned, and so they feel, oh, you know, I should be able to say this to you, or I didn't mean it this way, but it isn't about meaning. It's about perception. It's always about perception. It's how the other person takes it, and you have to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, and a conversation I'm always having is that I can put something out, but I don't get to decide how you're going to receive that information. So that's why these things to me are really important, because although you think something is good intentioned, there may be a possibility that it's actually not, and it's being perceived as something else, and could be hurtful, and that's not, you know, and especially if that's not your goal.
Yeah.
So do you have any specific childhood memories involving race or racism or discrimination, or were you bullied for your race, or did you encounter anything that...
A lot. I mean, there's a bunch of instances. I can recall one instance where I was accused of shoplifting at the 7-Eleven that I frequent all the time. Me and my sister frequent this 7-Eleven all the time when we lived in North Hollywood. We were kids. I was maybe like 9 years old. And I remember the person behind the counter was like insisting that we stole something, but we hadn't stolen anything. We were in that 7-Eleven maybe like 5 minutes, and I wanted to play the Street Fighter arcade machine because I remember it was the only spot around that had that machine. And I was gonna buy something. I was watching someone else play, and I was gonna buy something so I can get change so I can play it. And I tried to tell them, it was like I was standing around because I was, you know, watching someone else play, the whole 9 yards, you know, as a kid trying to explain myself. But no, it didn't seem to matter whatsoever. I know it was race related. I know it had to do with race because I saw the person who actually stole something. They stole like a piece of candy or something. I saw the person who stole it, and that person, he was like a little white kid, but he came in like all the time too, the same as I did, and he like bought way more stuff. Like he always was like buying candy, doing all this stuff, and I think he just did it once to just do it. But I mean, the guy saw me, and it was instantly like, oh, this young black kid, he must have stole it. It was definitely one of those things, because I tried to explain myself, and he wasn't trying to hear it whatsoever. And it's like, okay, you're supposed to have cameras in this place. You could check that. Like, we could corroborate this and back this up, and you're still being this adamant about it. It's instances like that. Or, for example, my mom had to tell me about this, but when I was in first grade, apparently my first grade teacher told my parents I couldn't read. She was like, your kid can't read. He's, you know, not a good student. I'm going to have to hold him back. She wanted to hold me back in the first grade. My mom was like, wait a second, that can't be.
Hold on.
Yeah, it's like, first of all, it's first grade. And then second of all, like, I know my son can read. Like, my son's been reading since before he got into this class and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where they had to give me this test in order to, prove that I shouldn't be held back. Not only did I ace this test, apparently, but I was like the most competent reader in that class. And my mom was like, I knew there was something about that teacher. When we had parent-teacher conferences, she wouldn't really speak to me. My mom was like, she was definitely racist. She wanted to hold you back, and you were the only black kid in the class.
See, it's stuff like that. It's like, that's crazy to me because you're a teacher. You made a commitment to educate all young students that come in and out of your class. Yet, we're not teaching all these professionals who are influencing all these younger generations, police officers, teachers, doctors, that their own social biases can get in the way of their actual judgment calls.
Yeah.
And so it's really, it has to change. And I do this all the time, and I'm like trying to think of solutions because I'm a problem solver. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, you can't get over, unless people are aware of their own social biases and actively trying to fix them or even try, like there's nothing you can do. It just baffles me that that's a freaking teacher and you're in first grade. You're like 5.
Yeah, I mean,
how?
Yeah, that's the thing. When I'm that young and I hear that, before my mom jumps up and she advocates for me, when I'm in the class, I'm thinking, okay, is there like something up? Like this teacher doesn't like me and, she's telling me I'm not doing well, but I think I'm doing okay. It was a whole thing. And it doesn't really stop when you grow up in this country being black. It's just one of those things where you have to persevere and then get to a point where it always has to be in the back of your head. I have to do much more. I have to be better. I have to be smarter. I have to be more. It's always, I have to be more. I have to be more. I have to be more in order to even just be seen or be considered.
Right.
And that's where things get so rough because not only should it not be that way, but once it's been proven time and time and time and time again, the competency, the intelligence, everything that's been contributed by black people in this country, it's almost like you want to throw up your hands and go, okay, really? We're astronauts and presidents and CEOs. It's like, what more has to be done here? It's like, really, how many more steps have to be taken here?
The problem with that is all that gets whitewashed out and tossed. They present you with all these other things so that you don't see those things. So another part of this, which I haven't really started yet, is introducing things about black history that people don't know. Like last episode, I was talking about the first black surgeon, or in one of our podcast episodes, we talked about the light bulb wouldn't have been invented without the little filament that goes inside that was invented by a black individual, or the security system that was invented by a black woman because, so it's things like that. And then, we're still teaching these kids, and I say this every time, the same freaking black history we've been teaching for years. We all know it, okay? Give me the new stuff. Give me more,
Yeah.
Give these kids some other inspiration and people that look like them so that they know that, oh, well, I don't have to go play basketball, or I don't have to go protest and do a Martin Luther King or a Malcolm X or it's just they need more examples of themselves, because that's how you get your persona and your perception of yourself is seeing these other things. But if you don't see anything that you identify with, it's how are you gonna?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and quickly I brought up that last bit to bring up this next point really quickly, is that it tends to be a double-edged sword, because although you have all those examples of black excellence and those things that you want to aspire to and that other people who aren't black can look to and be like, okay, well, there shouldn't really be any discrimination or any thought that black people are less or anything like that, but at the same token, there's always, for every black person, then there's always that onus to be, okay, now I have to be black excellence too. It's not so much to where it's like I can just be a regular black person. No, every black guy now has to aspire to be Will Smith and Kendrick Lamar. It's like we have to be LeBron, and that's the thing. And it's the same for black women. It's even harder for them, and it's just rough to think about that, to where it's like I can't just be a regular decent, but like let's say I have a nice decent job. I'm just doing what I need to do. I, don't have maybe a family or anything like that, but I'm making my way. I'm not harming anybody. I'm comfortable and happy with where I'm at.
Right.
I would have to be super secure in that, and that would only be for me because that's a failure in other people's eyes. And it's rough because what true equality probably really means is when it's to the point where everybody can just be mediocre if we want to. You don't have to be special.
Right.
I see the same thing happening now with the struggle that we've been seeing for so long with Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and how that struggle is now you see so much more of a light being shown on that, and all the same things that we were going through, you see them going through too, and that solidarity, how there should be more of that, but you don't see it. There's all this disparity, even though because races are pitted against each other, the whole model minority thing. And that's where we need to get past. The same thing with how I was talking earlier with Hispanic and Latinx people. When I was coming up, a majority of the people I saw were either black or Hispanic. Yet there was always this weird divide. There were a lot of times where you'd see the communities come together, but it was usually only when there was something tragic. Right. It was never just, okay, we're going to uplift each other and, have each other's back. That's where we need to focus more on. I think once we can get to a point where we're not looking at model minorities and, us all being pitted and disparate against each other because of the entire system of white supremacy. Once we see that, okay, the entire systems that are put in place for one race to be uplifted. Right. The rest of us need to see that, hey, as soon as we get together and we actually work together towards dismantling this system, as long as we have something better to put in place, that's what we should be working towards.
Right.
It's so hard to see all the disparate movements and all the disparate things going on when we would have so much more power if we all just came together.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest thing to get the focus on, because a lot of what I've been hearing with the AAPI movement from black people are like, oh, well, they didn't have our backs. What about the shooting that happened, in South? And it's like, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, there are things that have happened, but it's because we were both ignorant to really what our communities needed and what our communities were about. Once we now have gotten to the point where we have this common cause, we should be able to put all these things to the side, shelve all this stuff. Those things were in the past. Now we need to use all the movement that we have, all the eyes that we have now, all the tools with social media and everything that we have now to not only educate more, but ensure that people know that there's a reason we were taught about the LA riots and not about Tulsa.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? They wanted to paint different riots as different pictures. The LA riots just show, oh, there are a bunch of black people, looting and breaking everything because they don't have any sense and they're all ignorant, when they don't want to teach us about the riots that happened in Tulsa or about Greenwood and everything like that, because those riots were perpetrated by white people who were trying to destroy black enterprise. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? There are certain things that we learn about in black history as opposed to what we learn about with white history or with colonization or the tiny, tiny bit of history that we get from any other races that are within this country. It's just, once we get to a point where we can get past not only educating in the wrong way, but showing that, okay, we do have all the tools, we have all the education, we have all the stuff here to show people what the truth is. It's on us to actually push that forward. Right. And we're seeing more and more of that with the debate with critical race theory. Right. And I know it's being turned and really politicized, especially on the right, with what it isn't. Yeah. And it's things like that, to where as long as you stay informed and you know what's going on as when it comes to voting rights, when it comes to what education, like we're talking about what we're teaching kids in schools, what we're talking about, what we're doing as far as environmentally, the environmental impact that we have from the things that we do, how that is hurting our communities. The more education we have and the more that we learn about these things, we realize that from a systemic level, it doesn't just come from race.
Right.
It's not just from, oh, okay, because I'm black or maybe because you're white, we see things a different way. It's like, no, there are institutions in place that are designed to ensure that we see each other in a different way, that we always see each other in a different way. And unless we do what we can to educate ourselves, then it's not going to change. And that's why I think, things like this are important, because we can speak to each other. People can see that we're just two people having this conversation, yet we can beam this out to the world. And everyone can see this. And if you impact one person, it's worth it.
That's kind of how I feel. And it's funny because when I was in a social psych class, it was like, it was a community psych class. And it's like, if you don't just want to, if you're, trying to build up the community or whatever, and you just impact one person, that's not really what you want to do. You need to impact the whole. And I'm like, okay, but I need a starting place. So I need to, if I impact one person and that person impacts somebody else, technically it's two people now. So anyways, so I brushed that out a long time ago, but that's actually, in the beginning of your point, there were things in there that I actually hadn't thought of. So those were great points that I am going to think on probably more after this. Did your parents have talks with you about being a black male in society?
Yes, that's one thing that I'm glad you asked this question, because everyone talks about like having the talk and how true that is, because I've been asked this by other people, like, did your parents really have the talk with you? Like, seriously, they sat you down and they talked to you about...
But it's not one talk.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Like, I think people are like, oh yeah, your parents just sit down with you and they have one talk, let you know you're black and what, like, no, sir, I need you to understand that this is talks throughout my whole life.
Okay,
talks that your parents never actually had to have with you because you're not in this situation to where, the system is in place and it's against all of us and keeping, everything that you said, but at the same time, this is double on me.
Yeah, you are 100% right with it being multiple talks. I think the reason why I use the terminology "the talk" is because the central thing around the talk is the systemic racism.
Right.
So when you do have the talk about police or how to conduct yourself when you're out in public, or what to do if you find yourself in a situation where financially there might be a bind, because people don't think about that also, because when you grow up and you're black and you're just like a regular black person, you're automatically deemed to be poor or not to have any money at all. So for example, if you drive a decent looking car, more than likely you're going to be pulled over by the police. If you have a few bills in your wallet, you're looked to as some sort of drug dealer or something's going on with you. So that's what I mean. You literally have to think about your finances and how you conduct yourself in public. If you're wearing a whole bunch of flashy stuff and you're super rich and you're not a rapper, we might have a problem usually. And that's...
I didn't think about that.
There were so many different things. I think so. For example, my dad used to always tell me, like when I got my allowance and stuff like that, don't flash it around, don't show anybody, never tell anyone how much money you have. Right. It's not for anyone to know. That's your own business. And on top of that, once people start finding out the money you have, then they can either find out how they want to take it or how they're going to use that against you because they don't have what you have. So let's say I'm doing okay, I'm in a decent place in my life, yet there's somebody who's jealous of my position. They find out that I'm doing okay, all of a sudden they can get me caught up. It's little things like that to where you tend not to have to think of if you're not black, which is really, really strange, because a lot of our culture really is, like we were talking about before, about like coming up. And once you get to a point where you actually have something, people need to know that, because you need to be that example. It's supposed to be black excellence. It's supposed to be like, hey, it's like Jay-Z said, how am I supposed to help the hood if I'm still in the hood? I need to come out and then, extend back. But like at the same time, it's always a double-edged sword. And for us, we always have to think about that double-edged sword. It's always hanging over our heads.
Right.
And it's so weird. And that's what I mean. You can't just not think. You can't just get up, leave the house, and not consciously think about what you're going to do, how you're going to speak, how you're going to act throughout the day. It's literally something that you always have to be conscious of. When I wake up in the morning, I don't like stretch and it's like, oh, it's another good day. I was wondering what I'm going to do today. No, I wake up and it's another day of being a black man in America. So one of my first thoughts is, okay, my stuff is all my stuff together, licenses, license registration, all that stuff's in check. Money's decent. I'm not, I have to think about these things. And it's not easy, but because it comes with the territory, it's one of those things where it becomes such second nature. It's like when you drive home every day. You don't think about every single street you turn on or like all the landmarks, everything like that.
Right.
It's autopilot. It's second nature. You know just the route to just get home. And
Right.
you don't have to think about it at all. You can be listening to a podcast, talking to somebody, and thinking
Right.
about something else all at the same time.
Yes.
It's sort of the same thing. When you're black and when you're in America, you just have to have those things in the back of your head. It's like, okay, I can't be too much of this. I can't say too much of this. I can't do too much of this.
Right. Wow. Whew. How did you learn about your own black heritage, or and general black and like overall general black history? Because like we already stated, we're not getting that from school, and if we are, it's the same thing that's been reiterated. Every grade I was basically in. So, you said your heritage you learned. I guess you said your aunt did.
Yeah, my aunt did Ancestry, and so just to like really kind of key in where we were from,
Right.
African-wise, only because it's a lot of the records for pretty much just about every black person is destroyed throughout time because of what happened with slavery. That entire time, it's not like we came through and they're like, oh, your first and last name, how old are you? It's nothing like that.
We're
It's just
gonna change that last name.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's just generalized age, sort of kind of what you look like, and we're going to give you a new name, and there
Right.
you go. So we didn't get to we don't have traces of a lot of where we're from. It's just a few little disparate parts that we have. We have to patchwork together and then use our actual DNA to show that, like, hey, your DNA matches a whole bunch of other people's DNA from Mali from what we've got. So
Right.
we're pretty much saying you're Malayan. That's
Yeah.
where we're going with. It's not 100% accurate. There's no way for us to really know because we don't have like scriptures or writings or photographs or anything from the past. We don't get any of those things.
Right.
So we literally, our entire past and heritage for a vast majority of African Americans has to be pieced together with disparate knowledge.
Right.
So you do the best you can, and you really just go off the things that you know. What do you know to be true? So a lot of what I learned and knew came from my family. I knew from my family, like we came from Louisiana because they know my grandma was born in Louisiana. Then my grandma told them, hey, my mother was from Louisiana. That's how I know we were from. So
Right.
we go from there. And we just try our best to now build, now the legacy that we have now that we have all these tools at our disposal, now is when we solidify that family tree and go, okay, hey, there's videos and documents and there are things that we've
Right.
done in the world. And, if you become famous or you do something, you save somebody from a building and you were in the newspaper,
paper.
you have those documented things now to say, okay, we were here, we existed, our family was here, this is part of our tree. And that's what we have to build on now because so much was lost. It's really all we have. So I think that's another reason why the whole black family unit structure is so important to black people.
Right.
You see black people talk, even in my own family, I'll be the first to say it. There are people in my family that are a little bit bigoted. Yes, because of the experiences that they've had.
Right.
I don't justify it. I don't think it's cool. And there have been conversations that I've had with them. But at the same time,
But you
I
understand.
do understand. And so I've had a couple of my family members tell me, oh, okay, well, when it's all said and done, Rob, you bringing a black girl home, right? Like, we got to have more black children. That's the way we do this thing. And for me, honestly, that's never been a thing in my head. For me, I've always been like, whoever it is I vibe with, that's what I'm into.
Right.
I don't care who she is. She can be Laotian. She can be from South Africa. She can be from Norway. It doesn't matter to me.
Right.
But because of how they grew up and the structure that they lived in and how things, even there are things about being black that are a bit worse. There are things about being black that are better. But the one thing that we have been able to say is throughout this arc, it's like Martin Luther King said, that arc that we have of history, it hopefully will pan out towards equality. It seems to be getting more towards equality. So we have that to look forward to. This is one of the best times in history ever to be African or African American,
Right.
to be black in general. It was funny because there was a game, I forget the name of the game, but they have like a whole bunch of different like questions and stuff like that, and you're supposed to answer them. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions was like, if you can time travel and go to anywhere in history, where would you go? And for me, it's like, like 75? That's
not
about
going
as
anywhere.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's like, do I get to be someone else? It's like, if I could be white or like Asian or something like that, then yeah, maybe I'll go back to Roman times or something like that. But if I'm going to be black, there's no reason to go anywhere past. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And no one else can say that. And that's what's so weird and hard about being black.
Right.
People say, okay, well, why do you talk so much about being black, or why is it such a big thing? The reason why is because literally there are systems in place for hundreds of years that we have built institutions upon that literally billions of people and billions of dollars are used to keep going and to keep the train and engine moving. That's the reason why it's talked about. That's the reason why it's so big to me. That's the reason why we have conversations like this. Yeah, it's not because I'm crazy or because black people are weird or because we don't know. It's because these things have been happening for so long, and we can all see the gears moving now. It's like when you turn on the lights when you ride Space Mountain, and you can finally see all the cables and all the,
and you're like, it was that close,
yeah,
I'm
it's like,
never
yes,
getting on it
exactly.
again.
It's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
That's where we're at. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, we see all the gears and wires and cables moving.
Yeah.
We see how the institution works.
Right.
We need to change this.
Yeah. So when it comes to the overall general black history, is that something that your family pushed as well? Not like pushed, but taught you?
Yes.
Or was that like when you got older and you did your own research? Because I know there's a few different types, but for example, there's two different types. There's the type of family who's like telling you about your black history and teaching you about it, not just yours, but black history in general.
Exactly.
And then there's the one where, oh, well, it was, it's kind of quiet in my house. We had a small family. And when I got older, I decided I was going to learn all of this myself, because we know we're not learning it in school.
Okay.
So
I see what you're saying with your question. I would say it's a bit of a transition. When I was younger, a lot of family members, even like my own parents, my mom, my dad, they knew that, like, okay, the stuff that they're going to teach you in school isn't really black history. There are certain segments of black history and certain segments of a little bit of black excellence, but a lot of it is whitewashed, a lot of it is painted over, and a lot of it just, you're not going to be told. So they took the onus upon themselves to, yes, teach me a few things. Like we were talking earlier about the riots, like in Tulsa. Like I knew about that before, like when the Watchmen series came out earlier last year, and then like people first like were hearing about it, and it's a whole huge thing. They're like, what is this? And it's like,
seriously?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You can't blame people, but at the same time, I'm really thankful that I did have that family unit that jumped in and said, okay, there are things you need to know, especially about your history, you being a black person, that is important, that they're not going to teach you. And then because of that, once I got older and I experienced discrimination and bigotry and racism, and I saw how things were different from me from that aspect, then I started to take the onus on myself and say, okay, I need to do my part to figure out more about my heritage and where I come from, because I don't get a lot of this. I don't have a whole lot of family history stuff to go back on. I don't know exactly where in Africa our family is from and all these things. So I had to really take that step forward. For example, in college, I took a couple of African-American history courses just to learn a few more things just about not only what was going on in America, but how Africans, what they brought from Africa, what are the things that were important to them that they kept when they were here in America that couldn't be beaten out of them. You know what I'm saying? So it was important to learn those aspects also. And then just throughout my life, whenever I encounter things that I think are interesting, maybe just about African culture or about people that I know also who are African American, and they tell me like their stories and how they grew up and stuff. Like I have plenty of black friends who will tell me, oh, my family's from this place, and they have this tradition, they're doing these things. And it's like, the more you hear about other people's stories about how, other Africans did things, you start to build that patchwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I figured. Now, in the past jobs that you have had or tried to get or anything like that, do you think that, or even now, I don't really like to put that out there because I got in some trouble a while back, but we won't get into that. Do you think that when it comes to employment, that environment is more difficult for you because of your skin color? Because I know you work in customer service. So did you have to work harder to get, because I know you're not beginner customer service, so did you have to work harder to get to where you're at, or feel like you had to work harder in comparison aside from, we have to work harder and be twice as good or whatever, or have you ever in a previous job maybe faced discrimination or in a job interview or anything like that?
I would say more so previous jobs I've had than this job. Mm-hmm. It's more so, especially with black people, it's like a feeling. You can't, because the thing is, it's so hard to prove.
Right.
You can't really prove most of the time when someone's just discriminating against you, because even though they could say something that could be sort of deemed discriminatory, or you think, okay, they probably wouldn't say that to a white woman. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you can't really prove it. You just have to know. Sort of like my mom told me, women have a sixth sense, especially when it comes to guys who are like kind of predators.
Yeah.
There could be a guy who's super nice to you, seems like a decent guy, doesn't go in, but you have a feeling. They didn't do anything to you. They didn't do anything to you. You have no proof or anything like that. But there's something about them that is strange. You know it's strange. Sort of like the same thing when they say, how do you know that you're in love? How do you describe being in love? You can't really describe it. You just know. Same thing.
Yeah.
There have been jobs in the past to where I know for a fact I've been overlooked because I was black. A, because of the structure of the job. B, because of things I've heard later. You see what I'm saying? You gather information later. So there are a couple of times where I've gotten proof after the fact, but you never really know in the moment. You just have that feeling. And for me, it's always like, if I get that feeling to where I kind of know, like, yeah, you wouldn't be saying this to someone else, or you wouldn't be treating me like this if I didn't look this way.
Yeah.
You just sort of know, and those times where I sort of know, it depends on how big the situation is. If it's something that really could affect what I'm doing or where I'm trying to progress to, then it's something I have to address and see, the best way of navigating around it. But if it's something, for me, for the most part, it's like, if it's something that really is small or just petty, or it's because, someone else has some sort of problem, or they just, look, if you don't
sometimes you just have to look and go, that's on you.
There you go.
Like,
there are people out there that just won't like me for the way I'm look. Literally, it will have nothing to do with the fact that I'm black, or that I'm a guy, or that I grew up where I grew up. Literally, people will look at me and just say, you know what, I don't like the way this person looks. I just think he's like, I don't like the way he looks.
Well, not everybody is for everybody.
There you go.
Everybody.
I can't do anything about that. It's the same way, like, sometimes when you're discriminated against. There are just certain people that don't like black people. They just don't. It doesn't have to go with hate. They don't have to actively be doing anything to hurt black people. Just deep down in their bones, when it really comes down to it, it's like, black people, not really for me. And you know what? There's nothing I can do about that.
I laugh, but that's really not funny. It was just the way
but the thing is, in a way, it kind of is. And when you're black, you kind of have to have that humor. You got to be able to laugh off people who they're too far off the deep end. If you're too far off the pier for me to see you and I can't help you, I'm sorry. There are people that are too far off the edge. And it's not on you. And like you said earlier, it's not on me to change them or to educate them. Yeah. There are plenty of classes out there. There are plenty of free resources.
You don't have to go to the library anymore.
There are free resources everywhere. There are friends you can talk to. There are other black people that you can have conversations with that don't have to do with that you can still get insight from. That's the thing. It's not on me. I'm not a professor. I'm not getting paid. It's not on me to teach you and to educate you and to change your mind about things.
Yes.
But like I said, if you're just one of those people to where you're a little too far off the deep end, I gotta let it go. I have to.
Yeah, because that it's not worth. It's like a waste of time.
It really is.
Yeah, so it's just a.
Yeah, it's about how much can that person affect your life? If they really don't affect your life that much, then you really can't let it go. It's like some person was kind of racist to me today. It's gonna happen. You know, but if it's like this racist person holds my job in their hands, then I have to do something.
Now we have problems.
Exactly, and that's when it gets hard, because it's like when you're black, you always have to do something. You can't just do nothing. You can't just sit as a black. You can't just sit back and be like, okay, this problem is gonna get solved if I just don't do anything. If I just sit back. That's not the way it works. You always have to actively take a position in either defending yourself or making sure that no one sees you so that you're nowhere near. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's one or the other. It's weird and it's hard.
Damn. What do you love about your blackness or being black? Like, or your black heritage, black culture, whatever it is. Like, what is something that you are aside from just being black, that you're so prideful about that you just...
You know what? Honestly, and this is true for pretty much every black person I've noticed, that when it comes to being black, the thing you love most about being black are the little things that black people do that we found, that the little joys that black people have found that no one else has found. I have a good example for this. We have our own happy birthday. Stevie Wonder took it upon himself for Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday because not enough recognition was being put on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. He said, okay, this needs to be a federal holiday. We need to do this thing. So he made his own happy birthday song in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Black people are the only ones who sing when it's a birthday party. For black people, that is the version you hear. Happy birthday to you. You don't get that. That is the joy of being black.
Right.
You take hundreds of years of racism and oppression and killing and raping and beating, yet you find that joy. Black people invented the blues. Black people, our cooking is amazing. We season everything well. We come up with all that, the joys. That hashtag black excellence, that means something to us. That is what's good about being black. Despite everything that goes on, we find those little joys that no one else seems to find. We find that little crack in sunshine to where we took chitlins and we made it a meal. That's black people.
You're not wrong.
That's black people. And that's what I love about being black. No matter how bad I feel, no matter how bad things are, or no matter how good things are, for me, it's always like, I can always walk down the street, see another black man, he sees me, you get the nod. There it is. That's what's good about being black, because we all know we're all in this together in some way. Even black people that don't like other black people, you still know. There's still that little bit. There's still that you're black too. Yeah. And you get it. Yeah.
Whether you like black people or not, you're still black. So here we are.
So the little joys that black people have, even you get them too. Like if I ran into Candace Owens today, we probably wouldn't have a whole bunch of stuff that we would agree with or anything like that. But there were certain little black things that she knows about, that I know about, that not everyone else knows about.
Right.
You just can't escape it if you're black. And that's the joy of it.
What is something you wish people knew or you just want to put out there about being black?
That there isn't any real difference. There literally is one small difference. The amount of melanin we have in our skin, every other thing is the same. I would like for you to look at me the way I look at a Komodo dragon. Like, whoa, that's interesting. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't want to kill it. I don't think it's bad. There's nothing inherently evil about it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's different and it's interesting. That's the way it should be. I see you, you see me, different skin color. That's cool.
But
there it is.
But I still have all the same parts and the organs and the. That's what I just.
And that's what I'm saying.
I don't get it.
We should see that. We should see that one difference, and it should be interesting instead of it being hated or it being discriminated against or it being something that's inherently evil. There's nothing. It literally is just an interesting quirk. We are dogs. All dogs are evolved from wolves, but you have poodles, you have cocker spaniels, you have golden retrievers. They're all interesting. No dog is inherent.
Black people to dogs, but that is a great example. I
mean people. I said people in general, not black people. I mean people, all of us.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like we're all different.
We're all. That's what I mean. Just in the space that we're all descended from the same thing. We're all Homo sapiens. We're all human.
Right.
We just have little different tweaks that make us a little bit different, just like dogs do. They're all descended from wolves, but all dogs are different and interesting and awesome. There's not one dog that's inherently worse than the other or anything like that. They're just interesting things. That's what we are. We're just interesting mammals. And if we all just saw that, everything would be so much better. So much better. Because there isn't anything inherently wrong with anyone. We're all the same.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I want people to see. It's just, I want you to be as interested in me as I am in you.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. I also do want to point out that I don't know if you know, but there's this, I mean, it's been like this for years. White people want to be tan.
Yeah.
Okay. All that is melanin. It's getting you closer to black. So you can't be racist and want to be tan. I mean, you can, but it doesn't make sense to me.
That's the
see,
other thing.
like,
that's the other thing that's hard.
Where is this disconnect?
A lot of it doesn't make sense. You're right. A lot of it doesn't make sense, and that's what makes it so hard. That's the hard part about it. To where it's like a lot of this doesn't really make sense. There isn't any real logic or sense behind it.
It does make sense, but then that portion of them being racist but want to be tan when the only difference between them and a black person is the melanin is what the disconnect between their idea of that is the problem. Everything else makes sense. Oh, if I want tan, I need more melanin. I need to go out into the sun so that my body, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get it. If you could tackle a black stigma or judgment, what would that be?
Oh shoot, that's a great question. Black stigma or judgment.
Because I hate saying this, but I don't think like a normal white person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm black. I love people, period. Like, that's it. I don't care. I know you're black. I recognize that you're black. Like, I used to say I was colorblind, whatever, and then I realized and had a conversation with somebody about why that's not okay either. And
definitely.
So since then, I've kind of retracted. But a lot of people would have that same conversation and not think. They'd be like, oh, no, like, whatever. But I don't know a lot of the judgments and stigmas that you guys enter, or,
I think I would say this. Okay. The answer I would give, it pertains more to black women than to black men. But I would say that the one stigma that I kind of wish we could tackle, that maybe hopefully eliminate someday, are that black people are somehow mentally and or physically stronger than everyone else. Granted, even black people kind of purport this stereotype too. That's like, oh, we've been through so much, and only the strongest Africans survived the process of like slavery and going through shifts and stuff like that. And mental health. He's like, you black, come on, I can't have mental health issues. I'm black and stuff like that. That's what I really wish that stigma would be eliminated, because you have a lot of instances in the medical field to where there are doctors out there that feel like black people have thicker skin and that black women, yes, exactly, and it's to the point where we're not getting the same treatment. We're dying at higher numbers. We're getting more diseases.
They don't give you the prescriptions you need because they think your bodies are.
We're being ignored with these really critical things that not only need to be addressed in our community, but that need to be systemically changed for everyone. So, but the thing is, the starting point needs to be black women and black people especially, because we're the most disproportionately, hurt by these things.
Right.
Our house is on fire right now. That's where we're at. So that's the stigma that I want eliminated. Just we're not special, We're like everyone else. We want to be special, but that's the thing. Everyone wants to be special, and everyone has the potential to be special. But for us, it's like, we're not superhuman.
But if I just want to be a regular ass person.
Yes, we're regular people like everyone else. We need the same care as everyone else. We have mental health issues like everyone else. We're not superhuman. We are just people, and we need the help that any other person needs.
And actually, I love that you bring that up, because a different interview that I did, she had a really traumatic experience, and we also got into mental health. And it's just, when I was in social psychology, I also learned that there's all these things, the higher pain tolerance, the thicker skin, the not prescribing medication or narcotics because they think you're going to end up as a drug addict, or you have a higher rate of becoming a drug addict. Men, statistically, black men have consistently higher blood pressure because they're always.
Yeah, exactly. We're always in a heightened sense.
They always have the cortisol and the stress hormone rolling through them, and I don't think that people understand this. The other thing that I came across, especially during the pandemic, is that racism, or being subjected to continual racism with everything going on, is a mental health issue in and of itself, and it's not recognized. And I'm not saying we should go out and diagnose Black people or other minorities with these mental health issues, but I think we need to consider that is and can be a factor to why they would have these other mental health issues.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, obviously, I have a degree in psych, so mental health is, it doesn't matter. I don't care what color you are. I don't care how old you are. I don't care anything. If you need mental health assistance, you ask, do whatever you can.
We all have problems.
Everybody has
Yeah,
problems.
we all have
I don't care how
problems.
rich you are, how poor. Everybody has problems, okay? And some people are able to overcome those obstacles faster and better than other people, and some people need help. Some people just need to learn different techniques. Some people need medication. Some people and it should be equal receiving for everybody that is out there and that is possible.
Yeah.
You did bring up Black women. Is your sister older or younger?
Younger.
She's younger. Okay, so is there any specific difference between Black men and Black women that you kind of want to address or point out? Because I don't really have any, but since you touched on it, I kind of want to. I just know that everybody focuses on Black men, but Black women, even though they will be the first, and I had a conversation with this about somebody else, to hype you up. If you want to do something, if you want to wear something, if you want to change something, if you want to try something, they will be the first in line, even though they are the most oppressed and discriminated against. So, is there anything maybe not to put her personal business on blast or anything, like you've seen her go through that maybe you'd be like, I would never go through that?
Yes. She told me a story once, because she lives in Chicago. She has her own apartment, lives by herself, does her own thing. She told me about how there's this guy that she thought was like kind of following her. She didn't know for sure, but then she saw him again. And then she knew this guy was sort of following her. And it was like, okay, this is weird. And then it turns out later that that guy got arrested. He had killed a couple of Black women. Yeah.
So he's, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is, he went specifically for Black women. It wasn't like a thing. And I'm sure, look, everyone could be targeted. That's not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to say, this is where the specific part comes into. Now, take everything that Black men have to deal with. For Black women, multiply that by 2, and then add rape and incest in it.
Right. Well,
all
the women's issues that even white women have to deal with. So not only are you taking all the Black issues, but now you're taking all the women's issues from all the women, and you're adding that on top of it.
Yeah, so add the women's issues, add the Black issues, multiply everything by 2, and then on top of that, the societal things, like we were just talking about how Black women in pregnancy are supposed to be, near superhuman, basically. Right. Thicker skin, the whole 9 yards, higher pain tolerance. So the thing is, it's much harder for Black women. Much, much harder. I'll be the first to admit it because I have a little sister that has told me these things. And like I said, she told me that story. It's not like she was freaked out or super scared. She's like, look, if something happens, I would have had to defend myself or whatever. But she's like, the fact that there was this guy that wasn't Black and he's just targeting Black women, just out there trying to kill us. And that's the thing that this isn't the first time you hear stories like this. You hear stories like this around just about every major city and neighborhood. Right. And it's so weird how Black women seem to be targeted. And that's the thing that seems to be the difference. Yes, Black people in general are kind of targeted, but Black women seem to be targeted in a way that is kind of subhuman, because there are a lot of instances also to where we have a lot of, in our own community, as Black men, not really doing our part to stand up for our women and take care of our women. Yeah. It's the thing that we even have to handle in our own community. Right. So we're not, we're not absolved of this. This is something that everyone needs to recognize, that Black women are women. They are people. And I don't understand how that continues to be lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. And that's why, because I have, sat down with a few females, but if you know me, I hang with a lot of the guys, I watch sports, I do all this stuff, so I just have a lot of male friends. So it doesn't mean that I don't advocate for Black women just the same. And trust me, I have had the greatest support and the most hype from, just some of my black girlfriends.
Yeah,
that,
black women are the best.
Even if they don't want to sit down and do this with me, they've sent me messages and text messages, and they're just like, well, no thanks, but or whatever. And so, it's been great, but they have
the difference is just much more stark when it comes to, because it's like you said, especially in this country, women have so many extra issues to deal with, and that's the problem. If it wasn't just compounded with the women's issues and with the other stuff, then it'd be like, okay, at least we're on a much more even playing field. We can all be discriminating the same way. But no, it's worse, and it's not right.
Yeah, no, not at all. I actually don't have any more questions, but is there anything that you would like to add, touch on, that maybe wasn't said or anything like that?
We did cover a lot of bases. I think the one thing I maybe would sort of add to what we're talking about here is that as long as we realize that we're having this conversation, you could have conversations with 20, 30 other people. It's just being black isn't a monolith. I just hope that we, throughout this conversation, anyone who, sees this, maybe hears this, just realizes that this is my experience. This is the story that I know. This is what I know about, black history, the black experience, what I've lived.
Right.
There are so many other perspectives and stories, and being black is like being anything else. There's so many facets to the story, to the narrative. So as long as anyone who's seeing this just knows that, we're interesting, we're people like anyone else, and this one perspective hopefully gives you a little bit more clarity, a little bit more insight into some of the problems that we face, some of the things that we can do to make it better, the conversations that we still need to have. And just as long as you know that, okay, I saw this one thing, well, okay, I know what I need to know about black people. I'm good. It's like, no. It's like, I'm not a monolith. This conversation shouldn't just stand on its own.
Right.
It's one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, so in doing that, as much as I'm tackling the social issues, I want people to realize, oh, I went through that too.
Yeah.
Oh, I did that. And not just other black people to sit down, watch this and say, oh yeah, I know, I relate to that experience. But for white people especially, and that, because I'm white, so I'm trying to get my people to get their shit together.
Yeah.
I just want it to be, some of these experiences, I didn't have to go through that. And if we change this, if I'm caring for other humans and showing kindness, they wouldn't have to go through this. Or if I even had one extra thought about how I'm treating somebody and just changed it a little bit, or even if I passed off some helpful information to somebody else, or if I can just show that we're all freaking human, that's it. That's the end goal.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we centered a lot around the black experience, me being black, me being your guest here today. Also, I mean, you could be any race, you could be any ethnicity, pretty much anywhere that you come from. If you live here in the United States of America, there's always that different experience for you, and in a lot of those instances, they don't tend to be amazing.
Right.
It tends to be the nature of this country. I just hope that anyone else that's looking at this who happens to be of another race or ethnicity sees this, and if there's a bit of similarity in their experiences or something that they can touch on, that I hope they get something from that, or if it's something that they've never heard of before or didn't think about before, that they can get a different perspective also, because like you said, you don't want just black people watching this.
No.
You want everyone to see this and to understand that we're having this conversation for a reason. It's because we want to help bridge this gap and to make people more aware, educate people more on how it is to just have these conversations and for them to be okay.
Yeah, exactly. I ask everybody to pick an organization or a small business that we want to mention and highlight and put a link in so they can either donate or get some education from. Did you happen to pick an
yes, I
organization?
had the Voting Rights Alliance for sure, because especially with what's going on, the new voting laws that they're passing in Texas and in Florida and in Georgia, it's to the point where they're literally trying to undo everything that has been done in order for us to have the voting rights that we all have become accustomed to and all deserve. Not only that, just the rollbacks that they're doing are disproportionately being targeted towards low-income communities, towards black community, towards Latinx and Hispanic communities. And these things we need to change. So anybody who feels strongly about this, like I do, that voting rights are universal, that everyone should have them. We should have our own holiday to vote. That, people who look like me historically over years and years and years bled, blood, sweat, and tears died to have this vote. Honestly, Voting Rights Alliance, because they have a bunch of different coalitions that come together with this. It's not just one small nonprofit. They bring a bunch of them together. And the Voting Rights Alliance was started after Representative John Lewis had died. So, it's basically they're doing their part to ensure that everyone has the vote. And it's super important that, honestly, everyone should definitely go to votingrightsalliance.org. If you can donate, if you can, if you want to volunteer, if you want to just have more information, definitely do that.
Definitely. So I will put all the Voting Alliance information in the description box below. I will also be adding his social media information so that if you relate, want to have a conversation,
For sure.
You can add that in there. Do not send hate messages. I will come after you. Just direct them towards me. It's totally fine. Other than that, I am going to actually sign off on this episode of Transforming the Truth. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
For
Of
coming
course.
from afar and sitting down with me and having this super valuable
I'd
conversation.
love to do this again. This is awesome.
And if you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to me. Other than that, we will go ahead and see you next time. Thanks.